thrilled to have Karen back here again. Karen, your session was a very popular one, and we're excited to be able to jump in once again to get everything that we can from you in regards to organizing and downsizing our photo collections. A little bit about Karen. Karen Murdock is the owner of Your Organized Friend and Treasured Photo Collections. Karen's businesses specialize in offering services for older adults and their families who are often dealing with a lifetime collection of possessions, papers, and photos. Downsizing, decluttering, and reorganizing these items to save space, improve function in the home, and share the stories and memories of the family. Karen, thank you so much for being with us again.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here today. So I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to connect with you, and thank everyone who took time to join me today. I'm going to go in and do a few quick slides with everyone, and then I'm going to take some time and do some demoing at the end and go over some products and some real practical tips on how to organize those photos in particular. So let me just scoot over here to share my screen with you. Okay, so this is, of course, about how to create a treasured photo collection. And often when I meet people, they tell me that their photos are in chaos. So what we want to do is actually make a photo collection that can be treasured for many years, and a photo collection that can then be left as a legacy to those we love. And we're going to talk about some of the ways to preserve your photos, to share the family culture and history through your photos, some other media you may have, and of course, stories. So I've discovered that with many projects that the success always depends on having that strong foundation. So with this in mind, I always like to ask, so how many photos do you have? And I've discovered that most families have between 1,000 to 20,000 photos. Often the printed photos are now multi-generational, going back to great-great-grandparents. And they're overwhelmed. What do I do with these photos? So we're going to talk a little bit about printed and digital photos and the best solutions for dealing with those. But give a thought while I switch slides. How many photos do you estimate that you have? Do you know that I've discovered in some families it's not unusual for the family to send 2 or 3 photos a day of a grandchild? So should a photo collection contain more than just photos? And what is the future of your printed photos, of all your photos? They need to be curated if they're going to have a really successful future. Unfortunately, sometimes when I'm going in to help somebody to downsize, if there's way too many photos and they're not really organized, the family just gets overwhelmed and takes no steps and doesn't deal with the photos. So who am I? Why do I do what I do? Well, my name is Karen Murdock, as we mentioned, and I am a personal photo manager. And I got certified, 5-6 years back. And I just love working with photos. My favorite by far, black and white family photos that tell a story. So often what we're doing is we're helping families to organize their photo collection, printed and digital. Steps are quite similar, actually. We digitize those older photos that families have, and we do it in such a way that we're adding metadata and tags and facial recognition, so there'll be a value going forward. We restore old photos, which is one of my favorite things to do. There's something very satisfying about someone giving you an old photo. We had one just the other day of a beautiful ballerina, but the photo was quite damaged and the family was hoping to get it restored in time for her funeral service. So I worked over the weekend to restore it for them so that they would have that for the day of her service. It was such a fulfilling, personal journey for me to be able to help that family. So we create family history books, which is a lot of fun. And that's something that you can certainly do yourself and break it into little chunks. We also help families with archival storage solutions because often families are not storing their photos correctly. So we'll be talking and I'll be showing you some examples in a few minutes. So possessions. The downsizing and creating of a treasured photo collection does begin with downsizing your possessions. So there may be photos that you can take of items before you let them go. You can downsize the photo albums that you have and make photo books, or you can go digital and put your photos in a box. And I'll be talking about that and showing you examples of how that can really, really narrow down your the space that they're taking. It's the best way I can describe it, that it just takes up less volume. We had a young lady in her 40s who gave us 2 huge Rubbermaid tubs of photos that were in photo albums. We took them out, we digitized them for her. We gave her back all her printed photos in photo boxes. Plus we gave her the digital copies, and 1 tub was actually empty when we returned it to her. So that's a significant saving in space. Paper. Often we go into homes and we find that they're overwhelmed by their papers. What papers do they keep? So obviously there's those ones that have nothing to do with a photo collection that have to be kept. There's often papers that are of no real value that can be destroyed, but there's papers that should not be destroyed, things that are family records, letters, genealogy, things that tell the timeline of the family and the family stories. Those you want to keep and preserve. And photos, of course, which is the main thing we're here to talk about. And that's the family values, the culture of your family, and the lives can be seen through the photos and the memorabilia and the stories. And when you bring together those photos, those documents that support it, and the genealogy, then I believe you're creating real magic that wants to be shared with other members of the family. And a lot of people tell me, well, my kids don't want the photos. What they probably don't want are the printed photos and all those photo albums. If they're digital, they're more than happy, I find, to take them. So we're going to talk about the ABCs of photo organizing. So you really do need to curate your photos down. And when it comes to photos, there's a couple of things to consider. You have your A's, those are your best. You think of league play, it's always the A's and the B leagues, right? Well, A is for album. Those are the ones that people are going to want to share. Everybody always seems to want that same copy of that. Those are the ones you digitize. Then you're going to have your B photos, and those are the ones you're probably going to want to hold on to more just for yourself than anything else. And they can go in a box, or maybe they're supporting photos to the A photos, but you're not ready to get rid of them yet. And then there's the C photos, the duplicates, the triplicates, the sunsets, the flowers. We all have these photos in our collection, and there are a lot of them, and they probably just mean something to you at the moment you were taking them, but you can really, really scale those back and get rid of those ones. I often think of my mother and father's trip to Italy. And when my mom got home, this was in the 70s, and the film was developed, her thumb was across the lens for about half of her photos of Italy. So I can actually go online now and get better pictures taken in Italy than my mother's. So why would I keep these photos that aren't so good? I kept a few to signify that they took the trip, but I didn't need to keep every one. So at the end, there's going to be time for questions and answers, and I will hopefully be able to share some expertise with you at that point. But I want you to know that everybody's collection is unique, and I have discovered that a long time ago. Everybody has different things that make up their collection. Everybody has different things they want to have happen with their collection. So you really need to write down in a journal. I always recommend have a journal. Know what you have as far as your photos and papers in your collection. Know what your final goals are. And remember that you want to make sure that your best photos are preserved with archival safe products, and that all your photos have an easy to retrieve file system behind them. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share now and go back to my regular screen. And now I want to share some of the fun things with you. So this is a book that we made up a couple of years ago. It's called Moments in Time, and it's all about memories. And in this book, you can see on this page is a picture of a table. And you can't take a table with you lots of times because it's just too big. But sometimes there's a lot of history behind those tables. And I'll give you a great example. This is the table that was my grandmother's. And here in the book, I tell the story of the table. I tell how it was my grandmother Belle's, how we had all our Christmas meals around that table, all the special occasions, how my mom did her homework at that table, all those things, the memories. Because when I see the picture, it gives me the same feeling as if the table was there with me. So consider that if there's a special item that you're going to have difficulty getting rid of, don't be afraid to take a picture of it before you let it go and add it to a photo book. A lot of people do that, believe it or not, because it just helps to release it a little easier, and they still have their memories that they cherish. So the other thing with just going to move a few things here, excuse me for a minute, is the papers and the stories. So I'm going to show you a book I have here. It's a binder, and it holds the family letters and documents. And we've put it in date order from the very beginning. The first year I think we have is about 1920 going forward. And it's all these great stories that the family members have written along the way. And adding that just adds so much value to a photo collection. I had one client that her grandfather wrote a letter to his descendants on December 31st, 1899, and he finished it January 1st, 1900. With instructions, and it was passed down and not opened until the descendants until 2000, January 1st. So it sat there for 100 years unopened, but what a great treasure. And that letter now has been copied so everybody can have it as part of their historical significance for their family. So those are the kinds of things that kind of bond us. But what would that letter be without the photo? And we have those. So we have the picture of the gentleman who wrote that letter, and we have the pictures of the people that received the letter many years later. And that's what we want. We want to be able to share those things. So you're probably thinking, well, what do I do with my photos to get to some point like that? Well, let me show you. This is where you go through your photos and you have to pick your A photos. And often your photos may be in albums, magnetic albums. Remember those ones with the sort of plasticky cover? Well, those are the worst ones to have your photos in. Those destroy your photos. So what you want to do is get them out of there. Before you start, what you want to do is take a look at what's in that album, make up an index card, and on the index card put like maybe the decade that and the people, the events, who the family is, so that you can start working from there and then work and narrow it down. A lot of people like to file their photos in different ways, by events, by year, by people. I kind of like to start chronologically first so that I have photos from the 1950s all together, and then I have the 1960 photos all together. And then I kind of break it down a little bit more from there. Now, some people like to keep them in photo boxes. You can put 1,000 photos in this box, 1,000, and it hardly takes up any room. Put index cards in between, and it really shares the story. You compare that. Oh, if I can lift it up, to this photo album, which probably has a couple of hundred in it, but takes up just as much space. But if you've got really old, precious photos, you don't want to put them in that kind of photo box. That photo box is not going to be archival safe. It's going to have LinkedIn in it. A more expensive box that's archival safe will not have LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a product that is found naturally in paper products that actually causes that yellowing to occur. So if you've ever had a newspaper start to fall apart on you, it's because of the LinkedIn. Now you have this is an archival safe box. I get mine from Carr McLean in Ontario, and The archives, I believe, here on Roper also carry them. I've had to pick them up there a couple of times when I've run short. I keep the best in these because they really slow down the process of the aging of the photos, and you want to be able to preserve your most precious ones for as long as possible. But another thing people have started to do, and this is one that I really like, and I'm doing right now actually with a collection I'm working on, is use page protectors. And if you look up, always make sure that you're getting a PVC free and acid free archival quality. So when you're buying photo albums, when you're buying sheet protectors, look for that, because if they're not, they may not be good in the end for your photos. So you want to make sure your photos are preserved the best you can. So I'm going to show you this box here. These are photos from the 1950s. They were mixed up with photos from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, even a couple from the 70s. We pulled all the ones out from the 50s, and now we're starting to sort them for the family. And I'll show you some of the things that we do when we're making decisions. These are photos that I would call, I don't know how well you'll be able to see it. These are C photos. There's a picture of just a landscape, a tree, another tree. This one actually has writing on the back, says the name and the date it was taken. We know that this is a cousin, and that there's really not a lot of significance to holding onto these and sending them back even to the cousin who has lots of photos of herself at that age as well. So those photos are what we consider the C photos, and they won't be going back into the collection. So what we have though is we're going to do this by the children in the photos. So here is one child. His name is Terry. And oh, no, sorry, this is Robbie. And we're starting to put his photos from the 1950s in here so that they can be shared. And this is an archival safe product. And the good thing is we're just going to put them in and maybe even leave a couple of spaces empty, so that when the family observes the photos, they can say, oh, I don't think this is Robbie, this is, you know, Terry. And then they can be moved around. And we've done this before when families have found photos and they weren't really sure who were in the photos because they were so old that no one was left that could identify them. So we did that and then started playing Solve the Mystery, and the cousins were able to narrow it down a little bit. So that's a great way to do it. And you can slide these into a binder, doesn't take up quite as much room, and it's really easy. So this is the other brother. This is Terry. We're doing the same thing with his, putting his into a sleeve, all the photos from the 1950s. And this final little one is actually the sister, Karen. So yeah, it's my family. We lost my mom and dad a few years ago, and I inherited all their photos. And I'm just now emotionally ready to actually start going through their photos and start putting them together in a way that my brothers and I want. So I'm going through, I'm picking my favorites. This one, I've always told people I knew there was a picture of me with a cat because I'm very allergic to cats. But apparently at one point in my life, I wasn't. So I'm going to do that. And then my brothers and I, the next time we get together, we'll go through this and we'll each put a little card in the back if we want a copy of it. And those are the ones we're going to digitize. So that's going to be a project we're going to work on together. But it's really quite easy. You just pick up your pictures and go, you know, I don't even know who anybody in this sandbox is. Do I want it? No. So I'm picking out who's who. You know, here's one of me with the girl, Janine, who is the next door neighbor's daughter, who is my friend for years and years. So yeah, I'd kind of like to keep that because that tells a little bit about my family story. So I want to be careful though. There'll be photos that will be important to me, maybe to my brothers, but ones my children won't necessarily want. Will they care who Janine is? Probably not. We left our small hometown many, many years ago. So you have to be careful that when you're including them in your A photos, that they're photos that the family is actually going to want to see and share, and not so much just for yourself. Now, this is the way, I don't know, it's probably backwards. Sorry about that. Never thought of that. So this actually has the information on the back of the photo. So it says 1955, December 25th, Christmas, Karen. So easily to identify me. Now, you can't do that to every single photo. That would just take you forever. But if you do that to a few, then the family will be able to recognize that this is the same baby in this photo and that photo, and the years will start to make sense. So you don't necessarily have to label everyone, but that's a good way to do it. That's the same way we do it with our digital photos. We put the year, the month, the day if we know it, the event, and the person in the photo, or if there's multiple people, then we go into tags and adding extra data. To write on the back, somebody asked this yesterday, and I thought, what a great question, because it's true. You want to be using an archival safe pen. You can get these at Michael's or at the archives on Roper. That's really safe to use. Or you can get a soft leaded pencil. So anything with a B in it is going to be soft. With an H, it's a harder, and it's not as safe to use those on your photos. So you want to be aware of that. Okay, so I think that's the biggest thing to know about that. And then this is the part where everybody wants to start, and that's at the final product. But you have to go back and have a really good foundation for your photo collection. So that's why I always suggest organize and get everything that you have. Look at, are they in safe archival products? No? Well, then you need to make sure that your photos and that aren't going to get destroyed, and you want to take them out of the magnetic albums, put them into safe, archival safe products when you should, and then you can move on after to the fun stuff. So when it comes to what's fun, everybody has a different idea. I did a class one year, and a lady did a wonderful reverse birthday card. She invited people to her 75th birthday. She put her picture on the front, and inside her card that was inviting them, she had a little bit of a timeline on everything that she had done in her life that was major events. And I thought, what a brilliant idea and a great way to share her photo. So you might want to go look at doing a canvas, and you can keep it natural. You don't need to fix and repair every little thing. This is my dad. This is my brother back in the 1940s. So that's one of my favorite photos, because my father, shortly after that, had quite a major accident and was no longer able to work for the railway. So it's a special photo for me, even though I'm not in it and I wasn't even born yet. Make a story. This is a great story. I helped this gentleman to organize his photos and all the letters he'd kept for years and years so that he could do his story and share the family photos taken over the years. And here's some documents supporting his first job, his first paycheck that he earned at the age of 15. Great way to share your story with your family and friends. Some people like to move on and get information from their family history books, different books from where the family lived at the time. And that's a great idea. If you know of that, be sure to investigate that, find out what you can find to help build it. But always remember that you're dealing with copyright, and you're going to have to get permission to use it. I found that people are usually very, very good. They have no problem to share that with you when they realize it's for a family project. So I hope that that's provided you with a little bit of information to help you get started at thinking about what you're going to do with your photos, because you want to take them and if they're not organized, get them organized, get them into proper, secure location. Don't store them in the basement. Somebody asked me about that yesterday. How to preserve slides. Slides can be digitized. We digitize slides all the time for families. They're a little bit more expensive to do, and I'm not a believer that all our photos and all our slides have to be digitized. I believe we should pick and choose what ones we're going to do. You can lay them all out on a light table to take a look, and that will help you to decide. You can also get these little slide scanners. you have to play with them a little bit afterwards to adjust the sizes and the DPIs, but it's a really great way to be able to share your family slides, because I know there was a period there for 10 or more years where a lot of people did slides. So I'm just going to go take a peek here. I don't actually believe in using apps to scan photos. And the reason I don't is because I have seen during studies and classes that apps and that can sometimes distort your photo, and you may not even realize the perspective can be off a little bit. You might be dealing with a DPI that is not conducive to being able to use it for anything else. So one of the things that I suggest is actually, and don't use your printer scanner thing. They're not designed for scanning photos. What you want to do is you can invest in a flatbed. Power scanners are a little bit more expensive, but sometimes people go in as a group and buy them. They're not that expensive to get done professionally. You know, you can get them starting at about 35 cents a slide. And if you're going to do them, what I suggest is you're going to want your photo, you're going to want to make sure that it's clean, make sure there's no fingerprints and stuff like that, because that can show up. And then just give a soft little brush like this to get any dust off. And when if you get like an Epson scanner, there's an Epson scanner, I think it's only a few $100s. It takes a little longer because it's a flat bed, but you can adjust the DPI, because you don't want to scan your photos at less than 300 DPI. Because if somebody does decide that they would like a copy of it, they want to put it into a photo book. If it's not a good, like for example, if we did this one, it's so small that we went to put it in a photo book and we had just scanned it on a thing, it would probably be distorted because this can't lay flat anymore. And it would probably end up at a smaller DPI, so that when you wanted to enlarge it to this big, it wouldn't work. You have to have it at 300 to 600 DPI. And often you can't do that. There is one that's not too bad, and I cannot think of the name of it off the top of my head, but send me an email and I'll try to remember what it is. Oh, you know, that's getting harder and harder to do. And that's one of the biggest problems I'm seeing. Do you remember floppy disks, right? And now it's the same thing with people with their memories on CDs. You got to convert those as soon as possible, because the media's changed so much, so quickly. So I always recommend taking a moment, collecting everything you have. There are some places we do VHS conversions and we put them on a USB stick and then give them to the family and advise them to download them onto an account like Forever or onto multiple. You should always have 3 copies of everything. You have your printed photo, because you never know when something could go wrong digitally. And if the printed photo is all you have and you have a fire or a flood, then of course your memories are destroyed. So there are places that you can go, even it's very hard to find them now, but remember there was a time where you could get machines where you could put a VHS tape in and get a DVD done. And there is some different software, if you go onto Amazon, that you can use the software to put on your computer, and then you plug in a few things and the magic happens. We do that. I don't personally do that. I have one of my staff who does that, so I'm not great at explaining this the way it works, but there is ways to do it, but you should do it as soon as possible before that option is completely taken away from you. Does anyone else have any other questions? One thing I'd like to mention that is really important is that when you're working with photos, you may want to be wearing white gloves. We use white linen gloves. You can, that just are to protect our hands from getting really dirty, and it also protects the photos from getting all of our oils on them. we don't need it for all the photos, but if you're working with really old archival quality photos, you want to make sure that you're not doing that. But they do not recommend any longer that you do that when you're dealing with papers, because they found that the gloves even can cause some damage to the delicate papers because they're so brittle now. So be really aware of that when you're working with your photos, that you're not doing that. Make sure that you're cleaning your photos if you're going to be doing scanning of your photos. I think that that's probably the most important thing that I can share, is take the time to build a plan, to start with, this is where my photos are, this is what I have, what do I want to do with them? And for example, we were talking a little bit ago about VHS. So we have a bunch that we've converted. We're actually going to put it on a private YouTube channel for the client so that she can share it. But then we're also making her like a condensed version. We're going to be editing, because she's got 40 minutes of a Christmas concert when her children were little. Well, she only wants now, you know, maybe the 5 or 10 minutes of it. And so we'll be doing a compilation of it for her. So consider doing things like that. I always like to recommend not storing your photos through Google's or Amazon or any of those others, because if they decide to close down that service, you may find yourself hustling to get your photos out, and that can be a real problem, right? So if you've ever heard of forever.com, it's like a storage unit for your photos. So it's like you're buying a house just for your photos. You actually own it. So you pay like the one price of, I think it's $199 or something like that. And you get 10 gigabytes for your photos. And then if you go up and you need more, you can add more to it if you end up with, you know, 20,000 photos that you want on it. I think they say normally you can hold 5,000 to 10,000 photos, but you actually own it, so that the money is put into a trust account. So they can't close down. If they decided they weren't getting enough customers and they did close down, the Forever Trust account would keep all the accounts going that were in place for 100 years, which is the goal of that company. So I often recommend that, because you can then send friends and family to that site, and they can see the photos, and you can share your photos back and forth. And sometimes that helps with identifying photos. Just before we went live, I sent a couple of pictures to my brother, and I said, do you have any idea who these kids are in these costumes? Do we even want to keep these photos, right? I could have just as easily, I did it just with my smartphone, I could have just as easily uploaded it to a Forever account and had him check it out and give his 2 cents as to what he thinks we should do with them. So there's always a couple of ways to solve a problem. It's just what you're most comfortable with, I think, sometimes. So does anybody have any other questions for me? Anybody want to hazard a guess and put it in chat how many photos they think they have? No, nobody wants to share? Well, I'll tell you an interesting fact. I probably don't have too many. Very good, right? I probably have about 3,000 photos, which is kind of on the lower end, but it reflects my family's ability to buy film and have a camera back in the day when we were very, very young, poor family. And now that we are going digital, I have a lot more, of course, because my kids are sending me pictures. I've got 8 grandchildren. They're always sending me the pictures to share with me, which I so appreciate. But of my printed photos, I probably only have about 3,000. But it's not unusual when I work with families and we're organizing through the photos. I find that it helps to break them into little categories, like maybe we'll fill it up. Okay, this is all the 1980 photos and they fit in here, and then we take those and we scan them. And we can usually narrow it down and say, you know, we don't need this many photos of that particular event. So that when you do go through, don't be afraid to get rid of photos. And don't be afraid to actually destroy them. It's okay. And you cannot recycle them, unfortunately, because of the chemicals. So they do, we usually just send them for shredding. Same with negatives. Families, I find, aren't holding on to negatives anymore when you give them their options. Usually they've separated the negatives out, so it's not worth the time to try and match them up again. And the photos now you can make a copy and even enhance it so the quality is so good that there's not as big a need anymore to do it that way unless you're a real purist. The special boxes. So the boxes that are just regular photo boxes, you just pick those up at Michael's and other craft stores. Amazon carries them. These are not archival safe, but a lot of people use this to store their bee photos or even the more recent photos from the 1970s forward. I'm going to call recent because they're the ones that their children will probably curate even further down. But Carr McLean is where I get most of my archival products. They're a museum supplier located in Ontario, but you can also get these often at the provincial archives on Roper. And you can also get other supplies there as well for preserving your photos. Organizing recent digital photos is actually quite similar. And that's like I showed you on the back of this photo, I have the year. So what we normally do is we make one folder that is the current year of the photos. So say this year it would be 2021. And then we make a folder for each month. And then we make one that's called Z. And that one goes at the bottom. And then as the photos are coming in, we organize them in such a way that all the ones for January go in the January folder, February, etc. And then you can go back and look at the January photos, see if there's any you can get rid of, the ones that you want to keep. And if you're not sure about it, they can go in the Z photo to be dealt with later. And what you can do then is we actually do this with all of our printed photos that we digitize as well. When you get them back from most places, it just says image on it, right? So what we do is we change it so it has the complete date, the event, and sometimes it's just family fun, right? Sometimes it's no special event, and the name of the person. And then you can add any extra metadata, or if you're using something that allows you for facial recognition is always good, because while you know who's in the photos, other people won't someday. And that's one thing I say, and I think I neglected to add that today, is always start with your oldest photos organizing and work towards your newer photos. And the reason I suggest that is a photo taken last year, most of the people are going to know who that is if something should happen and you're not able to do it. And the other things to consider is, like, I just got a reply from my brother, Robbie. He says, I have no idea who those kids are. So are we going to keep that? No, those are then going to go with the other ones, the C file for us. Oh, files on memory cards do not last that long. Well, the thing that's interesting is that every 5 years, you should update your media to the next one. And the problem with JPEGs, is that every time you do something with a JPEG, it does lose a tiny bit of the quality. But saving something as a TIFF, which is a much larger photo, it just takes up too much space. So most people opt not to do that. But you're right, sometimes keeping things on memory cards don't last long, but putting them on a USB, put it onto your hard drive, have one on your hard drive, have one on an external hard drive, and maybe something like a forever account. Then you have 3 copies of it if it's digital. And it's not a bad idea to have that, and then have your favorite printed ones, of course. Actually, we have 6 different scanners here in the office. We have 1 flatbed. We have 2-power scanner, so it's kind of like putting it through a photocopy machine. We just put them through like that. It's that quick. We have 2 that are specifically for slides. And then we have another one that's actually our little portable one. It's only about this big and it's no longer made anymore, but it's great for really big photos. So what happens is sometimes families bring us in large photos or large artwork that their children have made. And with this particular scanner, we can take little bits of it. And then we take, say, maybe 10 different sections of the photo or the artwork, and we stitch it together with our software so that they have one digital copy. And that's very popular with families. So, and that happens, right? We sometimes no longer want to display that big photo on the wall. As a matter of fact, I'm working on one right now where I'm taking the photos out of here because it's not going to be displayed anymore. So they're going to save space because they weren't hanging it anymore. It was just sitting in a closet. So we're going to give it back to them. We're going to get rid of the frame and we'll give them back just the 3 photos. And these will all fit on our scanner, so that's not a problem. But sometimes they're so big that we can't. So, and don't forget, if you're taking pictures out of frames, that you have the right tools to get in and get things out without damaging your photos. Because you want to be careful, and if there's any humidity behind the photo, you may even want to scan on the glass first, which is really difficult to do, but that way you're not going to get any glare. And that's where our little portable scanner is really comes in very handy, because we can get it right down flat and we don't get the glare. Well, thank you everyone for coming to listen to me today. And I always like to end with, to remember to leave a legacy and not a mess. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Karen. Really appreciated this. Thank you everybody for joining us.